Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and we are back with another PvP matchups, tier list and ranking and all that. And this is going to be the first one that I've made since I looked at all of the trends in July, early July, July 1st as a matter of fact. And yeah, I mean, we're just going to look and see all of the matchups, go back over them again. I've wanted to do this a little earlier, but, you know, letting the meta settle, as well as, you know, not being dead busy, which I have been for most of this month, but just at least letting the meta set in for a little bit, and just seeing how things look, especially with the Aquila spells. That was the whole thing. And, you know, like, there's new gear setups with the Aquila wands and whatnot. So, with that in mind, let us begin. So, this is the last tier list that I made in June, on June 30th, right? And so, you know, it's all gonna be the same general, like, stuff. It's like still gonna have tilt, lean, likely, safe, and not contestable. So I don't know if my okay, well, let me get out of presentation view. But yeah, I did update the tier list itself just to sort of like add this stuff to it, and yeah, as well as change one-sided to not contestable, because let's be real, it's like there's, yeah, I mean, you're not going to see many additions to this tier, but it won't be empty, as it usually is not. So, let's begin with balance versus death, as always. So, this, I don't know if I want to say it's seen, like, shifts. I think death has improved slightly against balance, because on the last one I said that balance was winning this one by, you know, maybe 40 or 40 more times out of 100, so it's like a 70 to 30 type deal in favor of balance. But I'm thinking it's probably still safe, but it's not as safe as it once was. Like, poison has really and truly swung this matchup a little bit, even though balance does have chameleon, which can counter negative auras, but it doesn't clear the negative aura, and it doesn't put another aura over it. So it's like the balance does have to be careful with how they use negative auras, because now that death is a school that can counter both kinds of auras, and balance, of course, being a permabrace school, you know, like, they've got to really play a bunch around auras. So death being in this position to handle both kinds of auras, I think, is going to do a lot of work for them in this matchup. It's not nearly as competitive as I'm sure people would like it to be. Scarab alone is what keeps this in the safe tier, but at least death has seen some gains in this matchup. Balance versus fire. This is the next one up, and I said it would lean in fire's favor last time. I think that is where I will leave it. I think, like, this is definitely a competitive matchup, and the fire has to play real smart, but if they do play their cards right, you know, if they do set up like a King Art kind of deal with a bunch of buffs behind it, then the fire can definitely, like, gain the upper hand, and definitely, like, play well enough against a balance. And it's like a fire can make good use of negative auras in this matchup, because even though chameleon exists and balances are packing like 6 of them, you can still use it to set up a good hit. Like, you can threaten a hit with a negative aura, and of course aura warring, it's always a thing in this matchup, and as the fire you've got to be really careful not to get hit by that Niles. But yeah, I mean, just Scion of Balance does sort of hold this one down a little. It's like fire fundamentally should be beating balance much easier, but it's like Scion of Balance is just such a hard card to play around in this matchup, and that's like the main deciding factor. It's like a fire can't really set stuff up to combo nearly as easily. So Yeah, that is my rationale for this one. Balance versus ice. This is another interesting one. I think I put it as likely balance in the last one, but I think we're gonna take this one down to lean balance. This is one of the most competitive matchups at the moment. Ice has seen gains in this matchup, mostly because, you know, like, ice is very, very good against auras, but we are not exactly held down by, like, Scarab and all that. And ice, as we know, like, we can't really use shields all that much because of how Scales of Destiny works, but ice definitely, I think, has seen gains in this matchup. I don't think it's enough to flip it, but if you play very defensively as an ice and whittle them down before they can whittle you down, that's going to help out a bunch. And Shoe is a card that can work in this matchup. Like, I started packing more Shoes specifically for this matchup because it is a card that does work, and a balance will have to be on top of their trap counters to respond adequately to that. And yeah, I mean, you can definitely catch a balance off guard with it. Like, because 45 traps that come from Shoe, like, a balance has to address that somehow. And yeah, I mean, if an ice gets like a Winter Moon off, like, it's really, really good for the ice, especially if it's got like a bubble behind it, and, you know, the 45 trap. It's like bubble control and things like Shoe traps and Colossus traps. Like, those are what's really going to help. But of course, ice has all of this stuff going for it in this matchup, but balance still narrowly wins on the average, I would say. Maybe by like a margin of 5, like 5 percentage points. Like if you played 200 games, ice versus balance, like, the ice would win maybe 95 of them, and to the balance's 105. So it is close. It is definitely much closer than it was, and I'm happy about that. This used to be all the way down here, but thankfully it's not there anymore. But yeah, I do think that ice has made considerable gains in the balance matchup. It's just that balance has so many tools, you know. Ice still has to worry about Scion, although to a lesser degree. Ice does have to worry about getting around tower shields, and, you know, Fire Elfing and Tower Shield can be risky, given Chimera is a card that gives such immense amounts of value. But, you know, if that happens, you can set up more pressure, that type of deal. So yeah, it's like, ice has a lot of things going for it, and fundamentally should be winning this. Same with Fire, and Fire should be winning this matchup against balance by way more, but balance just has so many tools, and that is what keeps ice down in this matchup. But definitely a competitive one for sure. Balance versus life is next up, and I think this is just going to be a staple in the safe tier. Lifes do heal a lot, but balances, if a balance is running heal clears, like, it is going to be very, very hard for the life to win. And I've even seen some balances just not run Stormweave at all. Like, I've seen balances run Life Weave and still perform well in this matchup. Like, you give up a little bit of tempo, and it'll probably take longer, but it's like a balance weaving life is probably here, but a balance weaving like Storm of Death definitely going to be in the safe column. It's like, as a balance, you can kind of run whatever. So yeah, I mean, you're just in a very advantageous position here, because if you have those heal clears, then you're in a very, very good spot. And, you know, even if you only have things like Rainbow Serpent and Gearhead, you know, that's also enough. So balance easily beats life. It was balance's best matchup on the last list. I think that might hold up. Like, balance in a lot of these isn't like favored by too much, or it's like outright losing, like the Fire matchup, but it definitely does have a very good matchup against the Life School. So this is probably balance's best matchup. There isn't a good matchup for balance, and that is the Myth matchup. And I think, really and truly, if the Myth is not spamming blades and giving the balance free raw value, like, the Myth should reasonably have this one on lock. It's like, you can still deck fail and lose. Tell me about it, right? Like, you could definitely still deck fail a lot and lose as a Myth against a balance, but, you know, just from the perspective of countering all forms of damage mitigation except for auras. It's like that's kind of the one thing that Myth is lacking in. But if a Myth is running like, you know, 5 attenuates and they set up like 1 blade, 1 trap, and an attenuate with like a reliquary, that's 4 buffs. And y'all saw in my most recent Myth PvP video, I think the one I did most recently was Myth anyway, but I mean, y'all saw, you know, like I got a really good hit off like into a brace even, and it did a ton of damage just because I was able to get buffs, and like debuffing a Myth is generally not wise just because Myth sort of feeds off that. So Myth beating balance for that reason. It's like a direct counter to the whole whittle them down kind of playstyle. But as a Myth, definitely don't let yourself fall into the usual traps. Like don't blade too much, like again, and give free raw value. Like try not to get up to 11 pips, because like again, Scion of Balance is just nutty, and that is your lose con in that matchup. But as long as you can keep your pips low enough, you know, hit or buff hit is more or less what it is. Like buff hit, surge, buff hit. It's like that's the kind of deal that can net you a win in the Myth versus Balance matchup for sure. Balance versus Storm. This one, it is very easy for the Balance to win, but I think I have seen some gains for Storm. Like just like Shrike and Oni is really good, because Balance in a lot of cases won't run clears. So if a Storm tries to go for like an Oni setup, then the Balance can be in trouble, and the Balance has to respond to that. But in most other cases, probably not going to be great. But if the Balance does have things like weakness clears, then it will be good for the Balance. Like Balances are running weakness counters anyway, just because of like the ice matchup. Like Isis will use Jin sometimes, and that'll just be how that goes. But yeah, I mean, Balance just is very in the advantage against Storm. I will say that for sure. Although it still can lose. Like there's definitely been some shrinking in this margin. Like I'd say maybe Balance plus 35-ish. Like if you were to do 200 games, the Balance would win like 70 more of them. That kind of deal. So yeah, Balance, very advantageous position, but not as advantageous as it was before. I will say that. Death versus Myth is an interesting one. On the last one, I had like Myth absolutely trouncing Death as one of the worst matchups in the game, and I see a lot of people like talk about how like Death beats Myth for some reason. Like I see people say Death is beating Myth, and if you're a Myth and you're losing to a Death, what's most likely happening is you're using blades against the school that counters blades. Yeah, it's like I don't really know what else to say about it, because it's like Death with Fireweave is obviously very good, and as a Myth, you know, you should see that and try not to go for too many Tri-Shields to avoid giving a Death like Pyre Dragon value. So mostly just like staying on offense, and you know, because like Death is a damage mitigation school. If you can put a Death on defense and you're a Myth, like you are in a good position, and that is like a big thing with this matchup. I do believe sincerely that Myth wins this one by a safe margin. Death definitely has made gains. It's not all the way over here anymore, and Poison really does swing this matchup significantly in Death's favor, but it's not going to be enough to get it out of the safe tier. I would say Myth probably wins this one like 70-30. You just have to not drop the ball is more or less what I'm trying to talk about here. So it's like, don't use anything more than like a single blade in this matchup, because if you use like even a dual blade, like a Death will get a lot of value out of that with Skeletal Dragon. So it's like you just have to be careful with that. And yeah, Death versus Storm. This one was previously the second worst matchup in the game, all the way to the right in the safe tier. The further right it is in the safe tier, the further right in any of these is like the worse the margin and like the more lopsided the matchup is. But with the introduction of poison, I think we can finally move this one over here. I don't see a feasible way for Storm to be able to contend against Death. It is very, very hard for a school with Storm's fragility to match up with Death. And because, I mean, Death is a very defensive school. It is, you know, it's got a lot of resist, but it also has a lot of damage. And its Pierce cap is the same as Storm's resist cap, which I don't know who let that happen, but that's just another thing. It's like Death just stat diff Storm so aggressively, and Storm's kind of only win con is setting up a Turmoil Oni, and then maybe getting it off in Shrike. But that's kind of it. I mean, you'll probably just straight up die before then, and that's the whole thing. I mean, spells like Headless Horseman just trash on Storm. Grim Reader will do the same. It's just very not great to be a Storm in this matchup. And for the longest time, I was sort of teetering. I was like, is it gonna be safe, or is it gonna be like not contestable? But with the introduction of poison, Storm has lost their last buff that they can leverage, being negative auras. Because, you know, you can't positive aura against the Death because they'll Monster Mash, get like 2,000 damage, and put a -70 on you. You can't Blade against the Death because they'll Skeletal Dragon and get like 3,000 damage on you, and 2 blades back if you catch. So, you know, it's like negative auras were the thing, but you can't use those anymore because if you neg them, they can poison, get 1,000 damage, and then put a 45% aura on you, and then you have to respond to that with a positive aura of your own, which they can then mash. So it's a cruel and vicious cycle in this matchup. But I really and truly do think that, you know, Death does just destroy Storm. Like, it's a total stomp now, and I don't think... I have a hard time seeing Storm really come back with that. So yeah, and I mean, Storm's Rochambeau identity is completely locked in at this point. No more changes will be made to it, given the existing effects, of course, because like Storm is like the Star School anchor, so and the Star School update is already come and gone, so it's like, yeah, I mean, this matchup needs to be addressed with just how objectively terrible it is. Because, like, you can't do anything anymore in this matchup. That's how bad it is. So, yeah. And then next up is Fire versus Death. This is a very interesting one. Because in the last one, I had it as Lean Fire, which might have been a flip from Lean Death in the one before that. I can't remember. But I do genuinely think that it has flipped back yet again. The introduction of poison alone has flipped this matchup, because Fire, like a Death will be able to Tauret and then like get off a Rain of Fire with it if they're running that. But even if they're not, like dot spam only gets you so far in this matchup. Like, buffing as a Fire is very, very hard in this matchup because, you know, can't Furnace because the Death will Monster Mash, can't really Blade too much because the Death can get value out of a Skeletal Dragon, and now you can't negative aura anymore because if you have a Furnace up and you put an Attenuate onto a Death Wizard, they can poison and then take away 2 buffs in the same turn while doing 1,000 damage. So there's that, and that has really and truly just locked this matchup. Well, I won't say locked it down, but it has flipped this matchup back in favor of Death. Like, Fire can still win, don't get me wrong. Fire, like, if the Fire spams enough dots, right, it's like, then the Fire can for sure win. But if the Death doesn't let that happen, if they're constantly on life pips and all that, then it will be much, much easier for the Death to win. So yeah, it's like buffing is very hard against the Death, and that's intentional from the devs there. So another flip, Fire versus Death right there. Next up is Fire versus Life, and on the last one I said it was Lean Fire, but I don't know, like you can't really do much as a fire in this matchup. Like, the best you can really hope for is just like hitting when you can and then keeping Storm Pips up the counter. That, I think, keeps fire in the fight, but I do think that this matchup is flipped back to the life school. So yeah, I mean, fire, I do think fire loses to life again, but there definitely is a way to play if you are fire in this matchup. So, you know, it's not as bad as it once was. Like, I would put fire versus life like way over here, far to the right in the safe column, like back before, I guess, fires learned how to play the matchup. But you more or less get the idea. I mean, it is very, very hard for a fire to really set anything up and leverage any of their hanging effects, but raw damage alone will get the fire there, is the main thing that I'm really talking about. So, because like fires can play around auras in this matchup, they certainly can't with death, but they can with life, and that's a big thing that can help them as well. So that's going to be like the main buff that they use, as well as blades. Blades are going to be helpful. It's like this matchup and this matchup are polar opposites, because it's like the only buff you can use against death is your traps, but traps are a big no-go against life. So yeah, that's more or less how that one's been looking. For the next one up, we have Myth versus Fire, and this one I've been saying for a while that Myth is very in the advantage, and I agree with that still, mostly because like a Myth just needs 5 buffs to kill with a Toth. Like Myths don't even need Jin anymore. They just need to get 5 buffs and then send a Toth, and they're good. And like, there you go. It's like that'll get around a shield, which is very important. So yeah, I mean, this matchup, it's a weird one, but I do think that Myth is in the advantage. Like, if the Myth takes too long to set up their hit, then the Fire can absolutely come back and take the dub. But you know, I mean, Myth is just like, it's like PvE, and it's hard for Fire to stand up against that, given Fire does not counter blades. So there you go. Next up is Fire versus Storm, and on the last one I said this was one of the worst matchups in the game, and I maintain that. I think this is going to be our furthest to the right in the safe column. Like, you really have to be tossing as a Storm to lose to a Fire. Like, it's not inconceivable. It is definitely not going to end up in the not contestable tier, but Storm is beating Fire by a pretty comfortable margin, like 60 to 70 points. So that's like 80-20 to 85-15. Like, it is bordering, but they are still 2 volatile schools, and the lowest health and like the highest offense and lowest resist and all that. So it's like, sometimes the Fire can eke out a dub if the Storm is deck failing. Like, you know, if the Storm doesn't have catch, for example, or they can't pull their Shrike, then the Fire has a shot. But yeah, most of the time that won't be the case. So Storm definitely beats Fire by probably the safest margin in this tier. Next up is Ice versus Death, and this is a matchup that I thought might flip after Poison became more accessible, but I've played it a few times, and I do think that Ice holds on. Maybe by like a tilt margin, like the smallest possible margin, but I do think that it's survived, at least this update, because I mean, Ice just packs so many braces, and you know, Thieving Dragon, I've begun packing more Thieving Dragons, specifically for like the balance matchup as well as the death matchup. But yeah, I mean, just sort of like, Ice still has the tools, and if they play around auras well enough, they can still win the matchup. It's just very, very close, and I do think Ice is still favored, but it's like barely closer than it was before. But we still hold on, and I think that counts for something. So yeah, for sure. I mean, Ice over Death in this scenario, I think. Next up is Ice versus Fire, and Yeah, man. We had a brief reprieve there for a moment where where fires weren't just spamming dots, and we had a much better chance against that. And, you know, we could afford to run different counters. But now, it's like dot spam is like fully back. And whenever that happens, this matchup ends up down here. Because what ends up happening is, a fire will send a dot. Like, say, for example, it's a Fires of Mars, because they added that spell for some reason. And it's doing like mass damage over 6 rounds. Like one buff with it will do 6 bans. I don't know who let that through, but it's a thing. And so if an ice counters it with, you know, a Life King Art or a Toilet or something like that, something that generates heals, then the fire will just storm King Art and get heals for it, and then Surge, and then Rain of Fire. And then that's so much more. So it's like, yeah, I mean, anytime we are in a dot meta, fire just wins. And there's no way for an ice to contest it. Like, before, it was definitely in the safe category. Like, fire definitely had the matchup on lock. But, I mean, it's back to this. I mean, I don't really know what else to say about it. Like, fire is just, like, winning this matchup by an aggressive margin. It is like over 90-10 in favor of fire. So it's like it's mental. And yeah, I mean, not really much else of a way to put it. It is just a wild matchup. And yeah, I mean, it's a bad one for certain. So yeah, I mean, we're just back in that meta where counter the counters just reigns supreme. All right, yeah, let's move on. And let's move on to the only other matchup involving ice that could possibly end up lower, and that, of course, is the life matchup. This one is just so bad, like unimaginably bad. And here's the deal with it. If you are playing optimally, and that is what I am assuming for all of these matchups, if the life is playing optimally against an ice, there is physically no way for the ice to win. Because what'll happen is, like on my ice, I pack a total of 27 infections spread out across 9 threefold fevers. The last life I went against was not playing as optimally as he could have, but he still countered 24, or not necessarily countered, but either countered or healed through 24 of those 27 infections. And keeping infections on the Life Wizard at all times is imperative. And that is easier said than done in some cases. So there's that. But there's also the fact that Life Wizards have begun to pack Oni's Forge. And this has been a thing that's been going on for a couple months at this point, but Oni's Forge is a 3-pip shield counter. It's a fire spell that counters up to 3 shields for a heal over time, for 190 HP for every shield that you counter. So, Ice's one win condition in the past was to set up like 12 shields and then Shrike up and then send 2 Lords of Winter into a Scion. That was how it had to be done. But because of this, a life can now counter, because most lives are packing like 3 or 4 Oni's Forges. So if a life is packing 4 Oni's Forges, that means that a life can counter up to 12 shields. And so you're going to need to pull like every single one of your shields. And by the way, those Oni's Forges are going to be taken off threefolds the entire time. It's like, dude, I mean, it's like you can have a threefold fever on a Life Wizard as an ice, but what they'll do is they'll use all these mini heals. They'll use Legend Golem, they'll use Oni's Forge, they'll even throw out Goat Monks, and lose so much value on the heal, but it's like they're not even really like trying to heal that much with it. It's like they are trying to pave the way to to like opening up the opportunity to send a rebirth or a regenerate or a giga heal pretty much. But they're using these other infects on smaller heals because what they can then do is use Seraph to leverage those heals and put in just mass amounts of damage. And it's like micro-jading is what I've been calling it. But micro-jades can still kill if the ice is using threefolds. And, like, of course we have to. So, yeah, it's like they'll just heal through the threefolds, still get enough value, and just, like, they'll heal through the threefold and then Seraph for a lot of damage. That's the main issue with it. And they'll counter your shields, and you can't do anything in this matchup. Like, this is the worst matchup in the game for a reason. Man. Alright, next up is Ice versus Myth, and this is an interesting one, I think. On the last one, I said that Ice had the upper hand. I think that's consistent. Okay, I don't know why it's saying encoding overload, but anyway, it's not like it matters too much for this. But I do think that's consistent, and I think that Ice does still hold the narrowest of advantages over Myth, and that, I think, that is good for Ice, obviously. Like, it's another matchup that we're winning. But yeah, I mean, it's like Aura War is the main thing. It's like, we're not balanced where you can just like freely negative aura us or that sort of deal. Or it's like Myth doesn't counter negative auras in any way. So Ice really kind of has free reign with the Aura War in this matchup, which really helps them out a lot. But fundamentally, Myth counters shields, Myth counters weaknesses. Those are two of Ice's effects. And so it basically just becomes like a slugfest. The Ice is just playing for Winter Moons, and yeah, I mean, that's kind of just it. Like, the Ice is playing for Winter Moons, and like other big hits, like the occasional Woolly Mammoth, maybe, you know, a shield into a Lord of Winter, that kind of deal, just for some damage and combo potential. But yeah, I mean, Myth kind of holds all the leverage with things like, you know, detonating bomb dots and things like buff hit. it's like that's another way for Myth to win. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, like, Myth has a lot going for it in this matchup, but Ice wins the Aura War definitively, and that, I think, gives Ice the slightest advantage. So it's like winning Aura War plus Winter Moon usually is enough to beat a Myth Wizard if you are in Ice. So yeah. How many matchups on here do, like what counter matchups aren't actually counter matchups? I think it's just Myth Fire and Ice Myth. So yeah, fair enough. Maybe, like, you can still make a case for Fire Life, though, that's for sure. But alright, next on the list is Ice versus Storm, and there was some expansion on the last one just because, like, Storms weren't really using like Path B Storm Owl as much with their berries. But lately, I have seen some Storms just like sending a berry straight through a threefold and then using like the heals, the mitigated heals with a Storm Owl Path B. And it's like, because it's still leveraging the heals is the main deal, and you get more pips now for doing that. So obviously you can't just like chain it over and over, but you can use it as like a once-off type thing. Like, you can use it maybe once or twice a match, and it'll still give you an advantage. So that narrows this matchup back down a little. I do think Ice is still favored by a good enough margin. I don't think I would put it in the likely column anymore, but I do think that Ice is still favored enough, and that is it's good for the Ice. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, like, Storm just made more gains in this matchup. That's kind of all that I'm really trying to get at. And of course, if a Storm starts healing a bunch, like, the Ice just loses. That's just how it is. And Storms are packing a bunch of purges now as well, so there's that too. Anyway, life versus death is the next one up. And the fact of the matter with that is, if the life is full jading, then, like, nobody has a chance. But if the life is, you know, like playing semi-regularly, then I think the death does have an advantage, but it is not as big of an advantage as I said it was on the last tier list. Like, this has seen some narrowing down, and it's the whole micro-jading thing all over again, you know. It's like, heal through a threefold, and then Seraph, and get damage that way. And, yeah, I mean, I just think, like, life has made a lot of gains in this matchup, and it's like, death is still winning, death is still in an advantageous position, but it has a harder time now. And this is, I think, like, the one matchup in this list that did not move toward the death, which I find kind of interesting. But ultimately, death is still supposed to beat life. But if a life is, like, really just stalling a bunch and getting a bunch of quick damage with Seraph and Goat Punk and Legend Golem and all that, then it can become much easier for the life to win. So, yeah, it's like, you've got to be more on your guard. It's not a brainless matchup. But yeah, death has the advantage. That's all I'll say on it. Life versus Myth is next, and I said this was likely life last time. I think I'm going to move that over into the safe column, just because, I mean, like, Scarecrow, that's kind of all that needs to be said. It's like, Oni's Forge to counter the shields, so Jin isn't really as good. And then, of course, like, Myths aren't really running, you know, heal counters like that, so a life can also just freely heal if the, you know, max buff Jin doesn't kill, that type of deal. So it's like, life just has all the counters it needs to beat Myth, and we're back to this matchup being in the safe category. Like, yeah, it's like, lifes run Scarecrows. Like, it's not just one or two in their deck, like, they run a bunch, and that is how they stay in this matchup. That's because otherwise a Myth would just buff a bunch and hit and kill, but life's playing like they do, just counter whiz. Yeah. Not really much else to say on that. Storm versus Life is the next one up. And this one, I think I'm going to say, is probably going to be in the same spot as it was last time. Storm is fundamentally good against Life. If you're a Storm and you can force a Life to heal, good for you. Because, you know, Triton is a card. But, yeah. That's, not really much else to say about it. Like, Storm is just like the one school that can break through and, like, really just beat Life. It's like, damage mitigation is a whole thing with it, but I mean, a Storm can absolutely just wreck a Life Wizard's day, and I think that's good. I think, like, this and Balance are the two best answers to Life at the moment, as they should be. So, the last one up is Storm versus Myth, and for this one, I put it in safe last time for the Storm. I think I'm going to say that decreases down to likely, just because, like, if a Myth does get that hit off, it is, like, yeah, like the Myth just sort of wins at that point, and it's sort of like whoever pulls Shrike first and that sort of deal. But yeah, it's like, Storms do weave fire, and they do get all of that shield countering, extra stuff. So, you know, it's good for them, and that can clamp down on the whole Jin thing, but Myth really does not have the same amount of time as they do against a fire to, like, buff up like that. Like, a Myth needs to get the Jin off to win this matchup, and if they can do that, then they're okay, but if they can't, then the Storm is going to take the lead quite easily. So, that is my justification for that, and so now is going to be the part of the video where we look at all of the schools and then just do a full-on ranking of them. So, man, how how long has it been since something other than balance was number one? Like, probably last summer when death was number one during the Wraith meta. And even then, that was like, well, no. That wasn't contestable necessarily, because like balance was on top during the Hydra meta, and then Hydra got nerfed, and then death came up in the Wraith meta, and then then balance got back on top with scales and all that. So yeah, balance is an easy number one. I just think balance is the best school. Like, no doubt in my mind about it. Balance is the best school right now. It has 3 pretty automatic victories. It's like, it has a win against ice, and it is at least competitive against fire. Myth is the only one you'll struggle with, but even then, like, not that many people play Myth, and those that do, like, you'll see Myth's blade against you if you're playing balance, and if you see that, then like PvE Myth probably down here. Like, it's still favored a little bit, but it's not like a done deal. Like, a balance can still play better and win at that point. But yeah, it's like, for this, a balance has to like really play better, and the Myth has to deck fail. So if it's ranked Myth and not PvE, blade stack, free raw value, that type of deal. So yeah, that is more or less where I will put balance. Just an easy number one. And then next up, what would even be next? Death has really been on the up and up, but it does have some pretty catastrophic losses. I think, because Death is competitive in most of their matchups, like, except for balance and except for Reg Myth. So, I don't know, just based on like the fundamentals, it's like Death has 1, 2, 3 winning matchups to its 1, 2, 3 losses, but I still think Death is in the advantage. I do. And yeah, I mean, I like Death. I'm going to call Death number 2. Death, I think, has really risen a lot lately, and for sure, I mean, Death is a good school right now. So Death definitely up there. Poison has been such a strong addition for it, and I mean, it has flipped matchups. Like, it flipped the fire matchup, it came close to flipping the ice matchup, and it made the storm matchup like even worse. So there's that. So Death for sure number 2. I will say that. For number 3, though, I don't know what to really say, because 4 of Fire's matchups are competitive. Fire is a school that I think you need to think more on, but if you do think more as a Fire, you can definitely win it. Like, Fire is favored against balance if like they're careful enough. It can beat Death, it can beat Life, and it can beat Myth. But it's like these, you've really got to like be on top of things to really like stay ahead in that sort of deal. Of course, it is back down to having a full lock on this matchup, and it's gonna lose to Storm every time. But honestly speaking, like, I think I want to call Fire third. Just because, I mean, like, Fire in the meta right now, there's not really much that people aren't really running counter schools. Like, Storm has good matchups, and like does win 3 matchups, but it's like with all the deaths and balances in the meta, it's like you see here, the meta just sort of counters Storm right now. So I think with that in mind, we're gonna say Fire is probably the 3rd best school to play right now. Right behind it, though, I don't know, because like Life has a really high skill ceiling. Life really has a high skill ceiling, and it's like, if a Life stays on top of their stuff, they can win against Fire. They can beat Death. I have seen Lifes beat Storms. And then they obviously have good matchups into Ice and Myth. So I think I want to say Life is number 4. Just because, like, its potential is very, very high. And then I would call Storm 5th. Just because, like, it doesn't exactly counter the meta. Like, it has good matchups into Myth, and there aren't that many Myths queuing. It has a good matchup into Fire, of course, but I honestly haven't been seeing as many Fires queue necessarily. It is a good school, and people do still queue it, but it is not, like, nearly to the volume that we see, like, Death and Balance right now. So, yeah. I'm thinking Life 4, Storm 5, but then it's really all down to Ice and Myth. And both of those schools have really taken a tumble. But both of them, I think, do have high ceilings. This, though, having these auto losses to 2 schools in queue, especially, like, I've been seeing an uptick in Lifes, and it was like I was saying, you know, Fire isn't the most queued school, but it is definitely not the least queued school. So, just based on these 2 being down here alone, like, I might have to give the edge to Myth here, because it's like, it's competitive in this matchup, it's competitive in this matchup, it does beat the most queued school right now, being Balance, of course. And then, obviously, it beats Death. Like, Myth beats the 2 most queued schools, is what I'm saying. So, with that said, I mean, obviously, Myth doesn't have too much going for it right now. But I think that Myth deserves 6th place, and then Ice is once again down at 7th. I do absolutely, however, think that Ice is competitive right now. Ice has gotten much better over this last year, and it has a fighting chance in most of these matchups. It's like, if it's like, of course, you know, 4 matchups in the competitive tier, 2 not contestable, but, you know, it's like all 4 of these matchups and Ice can absolutely contend in and win. It also, like, Ice also stands a very good chance against the 2 most queued schools right now. And yeah, like, the Myth and Storm matchups also favor Ice, but it's just not as good as everybody else, is what I'm saying. So that, I think, is going to wrap up. Maybe like the whole Ice thing is a hot take, but really and truly, Ice, it's a decent school. The rest are just better than it, and that is where I think we're going to hang this one up. So, with that in mind, thank y'all for watching. I have been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more, and I will see y'all later.